The departure. As the sun peeked over the horizon, bathing the world in its soft morning glow, the city slowly stirred to life. One place, however, had already been bustling for hours: the airport. People from all walks of life found their paths intertwined at this hub of travel, a starting point for countless journeys. In a corner of this complex mosaic was the now legendary Flight 914, patiently awaiting its departure. From afar, it looked like any other plane, its metal body gleaming under the morning sun. Its engines were quiet, its wings motionless, but that would soon change. The plane, like a giant bird about to take flight, was silently promising an adventure to its soon-to-be passengers. In the terminal building, people were beginning to gather. There was a family, children wide-eyed with the excitement of their first flight. There were business travelers, their eyes glued to their phones, faces a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. There were elderly couples and solo adventurers, all of them an essential part of the tapestry that was Flight 914. Each of them had their own story, their own destination. Little did they know that they were about to become part of a story much larger than themselves. The airport staff was conducting their duties with practiced precision. Ground crew members were engaged in animated conversation, their voices barely audible over the symphony of the airport. Check-in counters were teeming with activity as the passengers of Flight 914 dropped off their luggage and collected their boarding passes. Announcements echoed throughout the building, a constant reminder of the numerous lives intersecting at this single point in time. Amidst this typical airport morning, the flight crew of 914 was readying themselves for the day's journey. The pilot, a seasoned professional with countless hours in the sky, greeted the day with a sense of calm determination. For him, like all others involved, it was just a routine morning, a new day of work. No one could have imagined the mysterious path this day would take, making it anything but routine. Flight 914 was not just a number that morning. It was a collection of hopes, dreams, stories, and destinies, all converging on a single point. As passengers began to board, their eyes full of anticipation and their hearts full of excitement, the world continued to turn, unaware of the enigma that was about to unfold. Little did they know that they were stepping into a story that would echo across time, a story that was about to become a part of history, the perplexing tale of Flight 914. The inside of an airplane before takeoff is a scene of orchestrated chaos, a dance that requires precision and care, practiced over and over again until each step becomes second nature. That morning was no different for the crew of Flight 914 as they made their pre-flight checks. The pilot, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, wore a look of firm concentration. He was the kind of person who thrived under pressure. He had a job to do, and he was determined to do it well. He meticulously went through the checklist, a document as familiar to him as the back of his hand, but treated with the respect and caution it deserved. Hydraulic system, check. Flight controls, check. Fuel levels, check. His voice was steady, echoing through the cockpit. Each item was carefully checked off, a testament to the pilot's commitment to the safety of his passengers. The co-pilot, a younger man with bright eyes full of determination, echoed his superior's calls, mirroring the same level of focus and responsibility. Elsewhere in the plane, the flight attendants were conducting their checks. Their faces were the picture of calm, their movements swift and efficient. Seats were checked for proper function, overhead bins were securely closed, and emergency equipment was verified to be in place and operational. In the galley, trays of neatly packed food were stowed away, drinks were neatly arranged, and the necessary supplies for a comfortable flight were double-checked. Every detail, no matter how small, was given attention. The safety and comfort of their passengers were their top priorities. Back in the cockpit, the last few items on the checklist were being completed. The navigation system was set, and the communication channels were tested and clear. The pilot took a moment to glance outside the window, his eyes sweeping over the airstrip. It was a view he had seen countless times, yet it still filled him with a sense of awe. He loved the sense of adventure that came with every new flight. All set, the pilot finally announced, his voice cutting through the quiet anticipation that had settled in the cockpit. The words echoed not just in the small space, but also in their minds, a quiet affirmation that they were ready to take to the skies. The pre-flight checks, an integral part of every flight, were done with the level of care and attention that they deserved. All those on board Flight 914, from the experienced pilot to the youngest passenger, were in capable hands. The stage was set for the journey to begin. The story of Flight 914 was ready to unfold, and the mysteries that lay ahead were yet unknown. The routine morning was drawing to a close, but the day was far from over. The cabin was a hum of subdued conversations, the rustle of magazines, and the soft clicks of seatbelts securing passengers in their places. The murmur of the engines grew louder, becoming a gentle roar that seemed to pulse in time with the collective heartbeat of everyone on board. The cabin crew, their faces poised with professionalism, made their final rounds, ensuring that each passenger was comfortably settled for the journey. In the cockpit, the pilot's hands rested lightly on the controls, his fingers tracing over the familiar buttons and dials with practiced ease. His eyes flicked to the screens displaying vital flight information. Everything was ready, and the tower's approval echoed through the cockpit. Flight 914, you are clear for takeoff. As the pilot acknowledged the message, his grip on the controls tightened, a silent promise of the journey to come. He eased the throttle forward, the plane responding instantly. The once gentle roar of the engines became a triumphant crescendo, a symphony that signaled the start of their journey. Outside, onlookers could see Flight 914 beginning to move, first slowly, then gaining speed as it raced down the runway. Inside, passengers felt the subtle shift, the sense of movement, the thrill of speed. There was an almost electric excitement in the air, a shared experience that marked the beginning of their collective journey. The plane hurtled down the runway, faster and faster. The world outside the windows became a blur of colors. The momentum pushed passengers gently back into their seats, a physical reassurance of the invisible forces at work. Then, with a grace that belied its size, Flight 914 lifted off the ground. The ground fell away, replaced by a stunning view of the shrinking airport and expanding horizons. The sensation of ascent tugged at the stomachs of the passengers, a feeling of exhilaration that only comes from defying gravity. The cabin filled with a quiet awe as the cityscape below transformed into a beautiful miniature world. Buildings were tiny blocks, roads a tangled web of veins, and the people mere specks in a grand tableau. For a few moments, everyone on board Flight 914 shared the sky with the birds, embraced by the vast, open blue. As the plane pierced through the cloud cover, the last link with the Earth disappeared. They were in their own world now, a world where time would seem to stand still. Little did they know that their voyage, starting as an ordinary flight, would evolve into a tale whispered about in hushed tones and wondered about in quiet moments. And so, with the world watching but not knowing, Flight 914 took to the skies, a silver bird gliding effortlessly into the blue. The routine departure was complete, the day's work just beginning, but the mystery of Flight 914 was only just starting to unfold. Chapter 2. The Flight Path. Flight 914 was on its way. As it soared higher, leaving behind the familiar sights and sounds of the bustling city, it embarked on its predestined journey, laid out meticulously by its crew. The flight path, a term seeming so simple yet carrying such immense importance, was the invisible road in the sky that Flight 914 was supposed to follow. The pilot's fingers danced over the navigation system, dialing in the course. He was focused, his gaze steady on the glowing screen that showed a virtual map of their journey. The flight path had been plotted days before, each point carefully selected to provide the smoothest and safest route for Flight 914. This path took into account many factors. There were the geographical features to consider: mountains, oceans, and other natural formations that would dictate how they could fly. Weather conditions, too, were vital. The forecast was studied with a keen eye, ensuring the chosen route would steer them clear of any predicted turbulence or storms. Air traffic patterns also played an integral part in the decision-making. The skies, much like the roads below, had their rush hours and busy routes. Our Flight 914 was like a single vehicle in this invisible highway network, following its predetermined route amidst countless other flights. Their path was a delicate balance of efficiency and safety, cutting across state lines, time zones, and even weather patterns. It was a well-practiced dance, the flight plan ensuring each step was carried out with the grace and precision of a ballet performance. As the passengers settled into their seats, browsed through the in-flight magazines, or started on their in-flight meals, they remained oblivious to the path unfolding before them. For them, the flight path was a simple line on the map displayed on the back of the seat in front of them. It was a static image, a two-dimensional representation of a journey that, in reality, was a complex and dynamic interplay of science, skill, and a little bit of artistry. Back in the cockpit, the pilot leaned back in his seat, his eyes never straying far from the flight instruments. He knew that despite all the careful calculations and precise planning, a flight path was never entirely set in stone. It required constant monitoring, ready adjustments, and a keen understanding of the plane and its response to the environment. As Flight 914 followed its initial flight path, the world below continued its daily rhythm. The plane, a gleaming speck in the vast canvas of the sky, was on a journey that would etch its path not just on air traffic maps, but also in the annals of aviation mysteries. The flight path of 914, initially a symbol of order and predictability, was soon to become an enigma wrapped in the clouded cloak of the unexplained. As Flight 914 settled into its flight path, the crew and passengers alike fell into a rhythm. The hum of the engines was like a comforting lullaby, a constant reassurance that they were moving, traveling through the invisible roads etched in the sky. The cabin was a microcosm of life. The flight attendants moved with a gentle grace, serving meals, answering queries, and ensuring that everyone on board was comfortable. Laughter bubbled up from different corners of the cabin as passengers enjoyed in-flight movies or engaged in conversation with their seatmates. Some preferred the quiet solace of a book, while others gazed out of the window, entranced by the mesmerizing view. Children, their faces pressed against the windows, marveled at the cotton candy clouds that appeared within touching distance. Business travelers, their laptops open, took advantage of the uninterrupted hours to catch up on work. A sense of peace and normalcy seemed to blanket the cabin, creating an atmosphere of tranquility. In the cockpit, the pilot and co-pilot monitored the flight's progress, their eyes scanning the various dials and screens. The communication radio crackled occasionally, a comforting soundtrack to their vigilance, reminding them they weren't alone in these vast skies. The plane was cruising at its designated altitude. The initial excitement had faded into a contented calm. As the aircraft followed the planned route, landmarks passed by beneath them, cities and towns, rivers and mountains, all transforming into beautiful patterns as viewed from the sky. For those few hours, the passengers of Flight 914 were residents of a world between the earth and the heavens, a realm that was theirs alone. But while everything seemed normal inside the cabin, out in the open sky, the flight path of 914 started to deviate subtly at first. The airplane, which had been following a predictable path, began to stray. The change was minor, hardly noticeable even to the experienced eyes of the pilots. However, the flight path that was once a comforting promise of order was now showing the first hints of the mystery that lay ahead. The skies that once represented freedom and adventure were about to transform into a canvas for an unsolvable enigma. The flight, which had taken off like any other, was on the verge of becoming an unprecedented occurrence in the history of aviation. But inside Flight 914, life went on, unaware of the twist that their journey was about to take. Unseen, unnoticed, the routine flight was edging closer to the realm of the extraordinary. The air traffic control room was a hum of activity. Screens displaying intricate maps blinked with numerous tiny lights, each representing an aircraft dutifully following its designated path. Among them, the light symbolizing Flight 914 was just one of many, but soon it was to take center stage in this orchestrated chaos. The controllers monitored each flight with a vigilant eye, ensuring the skies remained a safe haven for travel. One of the controllers, a seasoned veteran with years of experience, was keeping an eye on Flight 914. A slight frown appeared on his face as he noticed the subtle deviation in its path. He tried hailing the aircraft, expecting the familiar voice of the pilot in response, but the reply never came. Around him, the typical sounds of the control room filled the air, the low hum of conversations, the quiet clatter of keyboards, the occasional static-filled voice coming through the headsets. But as the silence from Flight 914 stretched out, the normal background noise began to feel heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Back in the aircraft, the passengers remained blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding. The airplane was their temporary home, providing them with a sense of security. Unbeknownst to them, the very threads of this security were about to be tugged at, unraveling the fabric of the reality they knew. In the cockpit, the pilot and co-pilot exchanged worried glances. Their attempts to communicate with the control tower were met with an unyielding silence. A sense of unease began to creep in, frosting over the previous calm with a layer of uncertainty. Back in the control room, the controller's frown deepened as he noticed the blip that was Flight 914 flicker on the screen. His hands tightened around the headset, a silent plea for a response from the aircraft. He issued another call, his voice an island of forced calm in the sea of growing apprehension. Yet, his calls, much like the ones before, echoed in the void of unresponsiveness. And then it happened. Without any warning, the light that was Flight 914 disappeared from the radar screen. It was as though the plane had vanished into thin air, taking along with it its crew and passengers. The blip, once a glowing beacon of life, was now an absence, a silent reminder of the mystery that had just unfolded. The control room went silent, the usual chatter and noise replaced by a chilling hush. Eyes widened, breaths held, as they all stared at the now empty spot on the screen. The routine had been broken, the normalcy replaced by an unexpected enigma. Flight 914 had taken off like any other flight, its flight path a track of predictability. But as it disappeared from the radar, it left behind a trail of questions and the ghost of its presence. The skies, which a moment ago had been a map of order, were now a canvas of mystery. The journey of Flight 914, like its missing blip, had suddenly plunged into the unknown. Chapter 3: The Disappearance. The air traffic control room was in a state of high alert. Flight 914 had disappeared off the radar, and the controllers were attempting to re-establish contact, their professional calm belying the undercurrent of anxiety that had started to ripple through the room. Air traffic controller John, with years of experience under his belt, had been the first to notice something amiss with Flight 914. Now he held his headset tighter, as if the pressure could somehow coax a response from the absent aircraft. Flight 914, this is ATC. He tried once again, his voice steady, but the concern unmistakable. Do you read me? All around him, the usual activities of the control room seemed to pause, the controllers holding their breath, awaiting a reply from the silent aircraft. But the only answer was the hiss of static, an eerie soundtrack to the mounting tension. John's partner, Lisa, a younger controller with an analytical mind, quickly began coordinating with other control towers along the flight path. Could a technical glitch have caused Flight 914's disappearance from their radar? Could the plane have diverted and now be on another frequency? As the minutes ticked by, it became evident that this wasn't a routine technical issue. This was something different, something that none of the seasoned professionals in the control room had experienced before. A flight with over 100 souls on board didn't just vanish. Meanwhile, in the darkened cabin of Flight 914, the flight crew was also grappling with the situation. The pilot's attempts to reach the control tower were futile, their calls swallowed by the same silence that seemed to have ensnared the aircraft. The comforting hum of the radio had become a silence that echoed the increasing uncertainty. Passengers remained oblivious to the situation unfolding, the cockpit door a barrier keeping the growing concern away. The crew continued to maintain an air of normalcy, their smiles holding back the tide of questions, their professionalism a shield against the spreading fear. Back in the control room, John was still trying to reach Flight 914, his voice a steady beacon in the sea of uncertainty. Flight 914, do you copy? We lost your signal. His sentences, usually so routine, now weighed heavy with the gravity of the situation. Each unanswered call, a grim reminder of the silent aircraft. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, the bustling control room took on a surreal aura. Monitors flickered, voices crackled over the radio, yet Flight 914 remained an unsettling void in the symphony of signals. The line of communication, once a lifeline connecting the aircraft to the world below, was now a one-way path, the silence at the other end a haunting testament to an unfolding mystery. Even as Flight 914 was falling into an inexplicable silence, the moments leading up to its disappearance had been marked by an eerie normalcy. The plane had been cruising steadily, its flight path a predictable route drawn across the blue canvas of the sky. In the cockpit, the pilot had been engaging in routine checks. The aircraft's systems showed no signs of disturbance. Fuel levels were adequate, engine performance optimal, and weather conditions favorable. In fact, the flight, until those final few minutes, had been textbook perfect. The flight attendants were serving the in-flight meals, their trolleys gliding smoothly down the aisle. The aroma of coffee and warmed food filled the cabin, mingling with the soft hum of conversations and occasional laughter. Passengers were engrossed in their individual activities, their world reduced to the confines of the cabin. However, behind this curtain of normalcy, subtle signs began to appear. The pilot noticed a small blip on the communication system. It was like a tiny hiccup, a minute glitch that lasted barely a second. But in the streamlined operation of a flight, even a second of irregularity could signal a shift. In the control room, John had noticed the slight deviation in Flight 914's path. He had chalked it up to wind patterns or a minor navigational adjustment. But then, the aircraft's blip had flickered on the radar, its steady lights stuttering like a faltering heartbeat. As these small signs mounted, they built towards an undeniable conclusion. The plane, once a dot moving predictably across the radar, was deviating from its path. It was as if an invisible hand had nudged it off course. And then, the blip that represented Flight 914 had disappeared from the screen, vanishing as if it had never existed. Back on the plane, the passengers felt a subtle shift. A slight dip in the flight, a minute vibration, too insignificant to cause alarm yet noticeable enough to interrupt conversations. eyes turned towards the windows, seeking reassurance in the endless expanse of the sky. Yet, the view outside remained unchanged, a vast sea of clouds stretching out under the wings. In the cockpit, the pilot and co-pilot shared a look of silent communication, a shared understanding that something was off. The control panel, once a map of steady lights and predictable patterns, was now a landscape of uncertainty. Flight 914, until a few moments ago a symbol of human triumph over nature's vastness, had become a ghost, its presence wiped off from the world below. The routine had been broken, and the disappearance had begun. In its wake, it left a trail of silence that echoed across the control rooms and into the annals of aviation history. In the wake of Flight 914's mysterious disappearance, the air traffic control room was a hive of urgent activity. Controllers who had been working other flights were now redirected to aid in the search for the vanished flight. The room buzzed with tension as the reality of the situation began to settle in. John, who had been the first to notice something amiss with Flight 914, now spearheaded the search efforts. He coordinated with other nearby control towers, urgently asking if they had picked up any signals or seen any unusual activity. Simultaneously, Lisa was working the phones, her voice steady as she notified higher authorities and initiated the protocols for a missing aircraft. Meanwhile, a search and rescue (SAR) team was assembled. Skilled pilots, experienced divers, and expert navigators came together, all with one common goal: find Flight 914. The SAR headquarters was abuzz with people moving in a calculated frenzy. Maps were spread on tables, the flight path of the aircraft marked out. The last known location of the flight was identified, marking the starting point of the search operation. The weather was checked and rechecked, the conditions noted to ensure safe flight for the rescue teams. Satellite images were pulled up, each pixel scrutinized for any signs of the missing plane. The SAR team knew they had a daunting task ahead of them. The sky was vast, the planes small, but they also knew that every second counted. Back at the control tower, the once systematic chatter was now filled with an undercurrent of urgency. Flight 914 had not just veered off its flight path, it had vanished without a trace. Controllers and technicians scrambled to come up with a plausible explanation, their faces a mix of professional focus and personal concern. The first search aircraft took off as the last rays of sunlight kissed the horizon. As the plane rose, the crew inside steeled themselves for the task ahead. Their eyes, now the beacon of hope for the missing passengers, scanned the vast expanse of sky and land. In the control room, in the SAR headquarters, and in the sky, the same question was on everyone's mind. Where is Flight 914? As the sky darkened, the searchlights brightened, piercing the inky blackness. The search for Flight 914 had begun. As the world waited with bated breath, the determined rescuers ventured into the vast unknown, their mission clear: to solve the mystery of the vanished flight and bring its passengers home. Chapter 4: The Panic Ensues. The shock of losing contact with Flight 914 sent ripples of distress through the air traffic control room. It was like an unseen storm had rolled in, suddenly turning the room that was a symbol of order and routine into a center of confusion and worry. John, the seasoned controller, stood as if frozen, his gaze fixated on the screen where Flight 914 had disappeared. He kept repeating his calls to the aircraft, each unanswered hail adding to the growing sense of dread. His headset, once a tool for maintaining the orchestrated chaos of air traffic, had now become a lifeline to an unknown fate. Beside him, Lisa was frantically coordinating with other control towers, hoping against hope that this was merely a technical glitch, that Flight 914 would reappear on the radar as suddenly as it had disappeared. But with each passing moment, her optimism was fading. replaced by a grim realization that something unprecedented had occurred. Within the insulated walls of the control tower, the panic was carefully contained, the professionalism of the team serving as a dam holding back the flood of questions and fears. Yet, beyond those walls, the news of the missing flight was beginning to spread, carrying with it a wave of anxiety. At the airline's headquarters, the top management was in an emergency meeting, a blend of shock and disbelief etched on their faces. How could a routine flight, on a well-traveled route, just vanish? Public relations teams were activated, their task to handle the oncoming storm of media queries and public scrutiny while conveying empathy and assurance. For the families and friends of those on board Flight 914, the news hit like a physical blow. Homes that had been normal a moment ago were now filled with a deafening silence, the news bringing with it a bone-chilling fear. Their loved ones, who they had seen off or spoken to just hours ago, were now missing. The distress signals, both physical and emotional, were echoing louder with each passing moment. News channels picked up the story, their headlines screaming the mystery of the missing flight. News anchors with serious faces relayed the scarce details, their words casting a somber cloud over their viewers. Social media platforms were abuzz with posts and updates, the digital world resonating with the growing concern. As the hours rolled by, the control room remained a hub of focused chaos. Distress signals, both spoken and unspoken, were broadcasted. The hope of a simple explanation was slowly being eclipsed by the reality of a far graver situation. Flight 914 was not just missing. It had vanished, leaving behind a turbulence of confusion and fear in its wake. The news of the missing Flight 914 spread fast and wide, sweeping across cities and countries, leaving a trail of shock and disbelief. Newsrooms worldwide buzzed with activity as the story of the vanishing flight began to dominate headlines and television screens. News anchors, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation, relayed the limited information available. They spoke of the sudden loss of contact, the unexplained deviation from the flight path, and the immediate launch of search and rescue operations. With each passing hour, the mysterious disappearance of Flight 914 became the focal point of global news coverage. On social media, the hashtag Flight 914 started trending. Messages of concern, theories about the disappearance, and prayers for the missing passengers and crew filled the digital realm. The internet was awash with the news of the vanished flight, the shared concern of millions adding a palpable tension to the online world. At airports, the flight information boards blinked with updates. Flights were delayed, rescheduled, or cancelled as airspace was cleared for the search operation. Passengers, their faces reflecting a mix of annoyance and worry, stood glued to the screens, the normal hubbub of airport life replaced by a sobering silence. In homes across the world, families and friends of those on board Flight 914 huddled around televisions and phones, their hearts pounding with every update. They clung to each other and to the hope that their loved ones would be found safe. The television, usually a source of entertainment, was now a harbinger of news, its flickering screen casting long shadows of uncertainty. In schools and offices, work was interrupted as people gathered around television screens and mobile devices. Conversations, typically filled with the mundane details of daily life, were now dominated by the mystery of the vanished flight. The usual boundaries of personal and professional lives blurred, drawn together by the collective concern. As the news spread, so did a sense of unease. The skies, usually a symbol of freedom and possibility, had become a canvas for a chilling mystery. The world held its breath, waiting for news, hoping for a miracle. The echo of Flight 914's disappearance had turned into a deafening roar, its resonance spreading far beyond the control room from where it had first originated. The sudden disappearance of Flight 914 plunged countless homes into a whirlpool of uncertainty and sorrow. Each passenger on board had left behind a web of relationships, a tapestry of shared memories, now suspended in the agonizing wait for any news. In a quiet suburban home, Maria clutched her phone, the last text message from her sister on the missing flight lighting up the screen. It was a cheerful message filled with anticipation for the trip. Now, the message was a painful reminder of the sudden void her sister's disappearance had left. Across town, an elderly couple sat side by side, their hands clasped tightly. Their only son was on flight 914, his excited voice still echoing in their ears as he had told them about his upcoming journey. Their home, usually a beacon of love and laughter, was now shrouded in a grim silence, the ticking clock the only indicator of passing time. A young woman named Amy, her toddler tugging at her dress, stared blankly at the television screen, the news anchor's words barely registering. Her husband, a steward on the flight, had promised to bring back a teddy bear for their son. She held on to the small ray of hope, praying silently for his safe return. In another city, a group of friends huddled together in a college dorm, their faces pale, their eyes haunted. Their roommate, an exchange student, had been on the flight, going home for the summer break. His laughter still resonated in the small room, his absence leaving a chilling void. Meanwhile, the airline had set up a crisis center to provide support for the grieving families. Grief counselors and company representatives manned the phones, offering comfort, sharing updates, and handling the hard questions with a mix of professional calm and shared empathy. These personal stories of anguish were a poignant testament to the human cost of the missing flight. Behind each seat number, there was a name, a story, a world. The agony of waiting, the desperate clinging to hope, the fear of the worst, all of it coalesced into a heart-wrenching saga of human resilience in the face of unimaginable uncertainty. As hours turned into days, these families of Flight 914 stood united in their agony, their eyes reflecting the painful weight, their hearts echoing the same plea, "Bring our loved ones back." Chapter 5: The Investigation. As the reality of the missing Flight 914 sank in, authorities started the daunting task of unraveling the mystery. It was clear that this was not an ordinary case, and it called for an extraordinary team. One by one, the best minds in aviation, engineering, and investigation were assembled, their expertise now vital in solving the puzzle of Flight 914. Leading the team was Robert Hughes, a veteran aviation investigator with over 2 decades of experience. Robert had worked on some of the most challenging aviation mysteries, his logical mind and keen eye often proving invaluable. His reputation as a tough, no-nonsense professional preceded him, and it was his dedication and drive that had often brought clarity to even the most baffling cases. Working alongside Robert was Dr. Amelia Chen, an acclaimed aeronautical engineer known for her extensive knowledge of aircraft systems. Her brilliance was only matched by her tenacity, and she had a reputation for refusing to quit until she had answers. She believed in the science of flight, and every unexplained incident was a challenge to that belief. Another key member of the team was Detective Richard Jones, a seasoned police officer with a knack for piecing together the most intricate puzzles. His work in various high-profile cases had earned him recognition for his ability to find connections where none seemed to exist. Richard, a man of few words, believed that every case had a solution. It was just a matter of finding the right pieces. Joining them was Olivia Martinez, a renowned crisis psychologist. Her expertise lay in analyzing the human element in high-stress situations. She had worked with survivors, witnesses, and even culprits, her insights often providing a different perspective on the events leading to a crisis. Lastly, the team was supported by a host of other professionals, including meteorologists, computer scientists, radar experts, and communication specialists. Each of them brought a unique skill set, their combined expertise covering the vast field of knowledge required to solve this extraordinary mystery. As the investigation team came together, they knew the task ahead was colossal. The missing Flight 914 was more than just an aviation mystery. It was a profound human tragedy that had touched countless lives. The team carried not just the responsibility of solving a complex case, but also the weight of the world's hope for answers. With determination etched on their faces, they began their work, their combined resolve a formidable force against the enigma of the vanished flight. As the team plunged into the daunting task of investigating the mysterious disappearance of Flight 914, they started by sifting through the initial pieces of evidence. The jigsaw puzzle of the missing flight began with these fragments of information, each a potential clue to understanding what had happened. The first and perhaps the most critical piece of evidence was the flight data. The radar readings, flight path, and communication records before the flight disappeared were thoroughly analyzed. Robert Hughes and his team carefully went through each line of communication between the flight and air traffic control. They noted the routine exchanges, the casual tone, and the sudden silence, a sharp contrast to the turmoil that followed. Dr. Amelia Chen focused on the aircraft itself. Using the available maintenance logs and inspection records, she studied the plane's model, its history, and any technical issues it might have had. She probed into the pre-flight checks, verifying if all protocols were correctly followed. A keen eye found no immediate cause for alarm, deepening the mystery. Meteorological reports were the next piece of the puzzle. Weather conditions often play a significant role in aviation incidents. The team's meteorologists pored over the weather data of the flight day. The skies had been clear and weather conditions ideal, another dead end in their search for answers. Detective Richard Jones looked at the passenger and crew list, their backgrounds, and any potential anomalies. However, each passenger, each crew member, had a normal story, ordinary lives interrupted by an extraordinary event. Olivia Martinez focused on the human element. She analyzed the voice recordings, looking for any signs of stress or panic that might indicate a problem. However, the collected voices exuded routine calmness, none hinting at the impending crisis. Despite their best efforts, the initial findings were inconclusive. The puzzle pieces they had, rather than creating a clearer picture, seemed to deepen the mystery. But the team was undeterred. They knew that every investigation began this way, a scattering of confusing clues, a maze of possibilities. They reminded themselves that patience was as much a part of their job as their expertise. The weight of the world's expectations was heavy, but the determination of the team was stronger. They pushed forward, driven by their quest for truth, their minds unyielding against the wall of mystery that stood before them. The initial findings were just the beginning. The solution to the enigma of Flight 914 was out there, and they were resolute in their mission to find it. Every investigation comes with its unique set of obstacles and challenges. The case of the missing Flight 914 was no different. The complexity of the situation was magnified due to the baffling circumstances of the flight's disappearance. One of the major hurdles was the lack of any concrete physical evidence. Typically, in aviation incidents, debris or flight recorders, known as black boxes, are crucial in understanding what went wrong. In this case, however, the investigators were working in a vacuum. With no wreckage found and no black boxes to examine, the team had to rely on secondary sources of information, which only added layers of complexity to their task. Another challenge was the vast area of search. The last known location of the flight placed it over the ocean. Searching the depths of the sea was a daunting task, made even more difficult by strong currents and unpredictable weather conditions. Each passing day without any findings made the search effort seem more like looking for a needle in a haystack. The lack of any distress call or signs of trouble from the flight crew was yet another perplexing aspect. Flight 914 had been in constant communication with air traffic control, and there were no indications of any issues until it suddenly vanished. This absence of warning signals made it difficult to hypothesize potential causes for the disappearance. The mounting pressure from the public, media, and families of the passengers and crew was an additional stressor. With each passing day, the clamor for answers grew louder. The team understood the need for closure, but balancing transparency with the sensitivity of the ongoing investigation was a delicate task. Internally, the investigation team faced the challenge of coordinating between different experts and agencies. Combining various fields of expertise into a coherent approach required exceptional management skills and clear communication. The stakes were high, and any misstep could lead to a critical loss of time and resources. Despite the magnitude of these challenges, the team remained undeterred. Each obstacle, instead of discouraging them, fueled their resolve to solve the mystery. These challenges were not just roadblocks, but stepping stones, testing their mettle and pushing them to think beyond the ordinary. The mystery of Flight 914 was a formidable opponent, but the team confronting it was just as formidable. They continued to navigate the storm of challenges with unwavering resolve, their sights set on uncovering the truth that lay hidden behind the unprecedented disappearance. Chapter 6: International Response. The news of Flight 914's disappearance quickly swept across the globe, causing shockwaves in every corner of the world. The international response was immediate and profound, reflecting not just the scale of the incident, but the deeply shared human emotions it evoked. From bustling cities to quiet towns, from towering skyscrapers to humble homes, television screens flashed with updates about the missing flight. News anchors, with solemn faces, delivered the latest updates, each one more bewildering than the last. The sudden void left by Flight 914 in the sky seemed to echo in the hearts of millions, their daily routines punctuated by updates of the missing flight. Across the world, airports fell into an eerie silence as the news broke. Travelers paused, their faces reflecting a mix of shock and concern. Airport staff, usually seen bustling around, paused to glance at the news screens. The usual murmur of departures and arrivals was tinged with a collective sense of unease. In the corridors of power, world leaders expressed their concern. Statements of solidarity poured in from all corners of the globe, each country extending their support in the ongoing search and investigation. This was not a single nation's tragedy. It was a global crisis that demanded a united response. Social media was flooded with messages of prayers and hopes for the passengers and crew of Flight 914. #PrayForFlight 914 became a trending hashtag, cutting across national boundaries, languages, and cultures. Each message, each tweet, each post was a testament to the collective empathy of humanity in the face of shared adversity. Vigils were held worldwide, candles lit in silent prayer for the safe return of those aboard the missing flight. From Tokyo to Toronto, Sydney to Stockholm, people gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candles, their hearts united in hope and prayer. The world was on edge, the absence of Flight 914 a glaring reminder of the fragility of life. But amidst the shock and uncertainty, humanity's collective strength shone bright. This shared sense of shock and worry also brought with it a wave of shared empathy and solidarity, the world standing united in the face of an unprecedented crisis. The story of Flight 914 had become a shared narrative, its unfolding chapters keenly followed by millions around the world. The world watched with bated breath as the investigation into Flight 914's disappearance continued. The story had touched the hearts of people globally, and countries stepped forward to lend their support, transforming the incident from a national crisis into an international mission. Leading the way was the United States, with its advanced technology and seasoned investigation teams. The National Transportation Safety Board offered their expertise, ready to send teams of experienced aviation accident investigators. The United States Coast Guard was put on standby, their ships and planes ready to join the search over the vast ocean. Europe, too, was quick to respond. The United Kingdom, France, and Germany offered their best aviation experts and pledged support in search and rescue operations. Their vast experience in dealing with aviation accidents was a welcome addition to the investigation. Across the Pacific, Japan and Australia also extended their assistance. Japan offered its cutting-edge satellite imagery technology, which could prove vital in locating any potential wreckage. Australia, with its extensive experience in maritime search and rescue operations, offered its skilled personnel and resources. Canada offered the support of its Royal Canadian Air Force and Navy for search and rescue operations, while Russia provided its satellite data and advanced oceanographic research vessels. Smaller countries may not have had the resources of the major powers, but their contributions were no less significant. Offers poured in from nations far and wide, from Scandinavia to South Africa, each ready to lend a hand in whatever way they could. International agencies like Interpol and the International Civil Aviation Organization also stepped in, offering their comprehensive databases and networks to aid in the investigation. Their involvement brought a global perspective to the investigation, connecting dots that individual nations might have missed. The collective international response was overwhelming. The disappearance of Flight 914 had blurred geographical boundaries, uniting nations in a shared mission. This incident, as mysterious and tragic as it was, had triggered an unprecedented global solidarity, showcasing humanity's shared compassion in times of crisis. The story of Flight 914's disappearance was a narrative that gripped the world, dominating news cycles and stirring conversations across continents. Media outlets from every corner of the globe provided relentless coverage, each bringing their unique perspective to the unfolding mystery. In the United States, major news networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC led their bulletins with updates on Flight 914. Expert panels filled television screens, analyzing every piece of information. Aviation experts, former pilots, meteorologists, and retired air traffic controllers provided their insights, trying to make sense of the confusing scenario. Across the Atlantic, the BBC in the United Kingdom offered comprehensive coverage. Their reporting was a balance of facts, expert opinion, and human stories. They also devoted considerable airtime to discussing the impact of the incident on international aviation safety. European news outlets, including France's France 24 and Germany's Deutsche Welle, also dedicated substantial coverage to the story. Their focus extended beyond the incident itself, looking at broader implications such as the psychological impact on global travelers and potential policy changes in aviation safety. In Asia, broadcasters like Japan's NHK and India's NDTV provided regular updates and highlighted their respective governments' contributions to the international search and rescue efforts. They also featured stories about local vigils held in support of the passengers and crew of Flight 914. In Australia, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, led with in-depth stories about the Australian response to the incident, featuring interviews with Australian families who had loved ones aboard Flight 914. The Al Jazeera network, headquartered in Qatar, gave voice to the Middle Eastern perspective, emphasizing the global unity in response to the crisis. Online platforms and social media also played a crucial role in global media coverage. News updates, expert blogs, and public discussions were shared and reshared, fueling worldwide engagement with the story. Regardless of the region, the underlying narrative remained the same: a world united in its concern, curiosity, and hope for Flight 914. The global media coverage, diverse as it was, painted a picture of a world deeply connected by shared human emotions, worry, hope, and an intense desire to uncover the